Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're going to take a look at these two new box sets for the Mausritter Sword and Whiskers role-playing game. I did a review of the original edition of Mausritter, which was just a pamphlet a little while back, and this fleshes it out and adds a whole bunch of new things to play with. So this is the core rules for Mausritter, has everything you need to get going and playing the game. Whereas this, the estate, is an adventure collection, which is done in a really interesting format that we're going to get into in the second half of the video once we look through that. Here we have the back of the two boxes. Take up the sword and don the whiskers of a brave mouse adventurer in Mausritter, the rules-light fantasy adventure role-playing game. It's brutally fast and equally flavorful, physical card-based inventory, dangerous and evocative magic, generous toolbox of resources, and you can delve into the ready-to-play adventure site of Stumpsville and explore further into the earldom of Eck. Over here we have the adventure, and it has a whole bunch of adventures, really. It's just like it's a compendium written by a number of different writers from across the OSR, so that's really cool to see. I would categorize this as a OSR adjacent game. It draws a lot of inspiration from Into the Odd, as well as my own game Knave, and it takes it in a new direction. And you're a tiny little mouse, you're dealing with a human-sized world. So it's a little bit like The Borrowers in that sense. There's a lot of challenges that you have to overcome through using your equipment and thinking critically, which is just how I like to play games. First of all, let's look at the core boxed set right here. Now, it's important to point out that this is actually the third edition or third version of the Mausritter core rules. The first version that we ever saw was the Mausritter little pamphlet, and the PDF of this is still free, available online. Links to all of these products will be down in the description below. And then it was turned into this box set right here. This is the first edition of the box set, which is now out of print. This is the one that's available currently. It's a little bit of a shame. I really like the design of the first edition box set, just because it has this wallpaper design, and it really gives you the sense of being a tiny little person crawling in someone's living room, which is what you are. It has that borrower's feel, like I mentioned before. It just has that kind of minimalist design that I quite enjoy. Fortunately, the actual contents of the new box set are basically identical to this one, but I just wanted to show you some of the minor differences. For example, in the original one, the core rulebook looked like this. It had like this little mouse hole, and then it had all the rules in here. And then in the new edition, what we have is a slightly different slightly different core rulebook, which is actually just as pretty. I really like the way it's designed. Instead of being a mouse hole, it's now like a knot hole in an oak, so you're outside now rather than in someone's house. And I think that's pretty clever. I like the way the little hole is punched in the center of it. And the only other main difference is that this also includes this turn tracker for tracking time in your games, which the original box set did not have. And it's really nice. I think something like this could be very valuable in any kind of OSR game where you have 10-minute turns being tracked over hours, right? And you have sunrise, sunset. So it's easier to track time just by checking off little boxes here. Before we actually delve into everything that you get inside this box set though, a quick shout out from today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Into the AM and their series of fantasy and sci-fi themed t-shirts. The one I'm wearing right now is one of their new designs. I like it quite a bit. It's got a skeleton sort of overgrown with vines and fungi. Seems like a great shirt to wear if you were dungeon mastering a setting like Dolmenwood, for example. The shirts are super comfortable and they are really affordable too. Right now they have a deal going on where for $60 you can get 3 t-shirts in a bundle. And then if you make sure to use my link in the description down below, you can get an additional 10% off their entire web store, which is packed with all sorts of great designs for fantasy or even sci-fi role-playing. Thanks again to Into the AM for sponsoring. Now let's get back to the show. All right, let's see what you get inside the core rulebook here. It's very similar to that original yellow pamphlet that I showed you previously. Only some minor differences, mostly expanding things a little bit. We have our acknowledgements. As I said, Into the Odd is an inspiration, Goblin Punch, Knave, Mothership, Moonhot, Last Gasp Grimoire, Coins and Scrolls, and a number of books like the Brambley Hedge Church Mice, The Rescuers, Arietti, right? There's that Borrowers influence again. Brave Mice in a Dangerous World. We have a brief introduction to the setting. What is Mausritter? What's a role-playing game? What you need to play. I don't think this was in the original pamphlet. And then we get into actually making a mouse and inventory. I went through this in more detail in my previous review. of that pamphlet edition, so I'm not going to go through this in too much detail. The rules are basically the same. In fact, the text is virtually identical throughout. No major changes there. It's just being put into a nicer format. It's a very complete game. You can recruit help, you have hirelings, there's rules for war bands, rules for constructing buildings. There's an extensive example of play. I think this is a new addition, and how magic is actually going to work. Some pretty extensive Game Master resources here, which is always really great. Best practices on how to actually run the game. Exploration in time, how to use the time tracker that I showed you over there. Rules for weather and encounters. Your typical reaction table that you're going to see in most OSR games. How to do creatures and languages, which is really nice because the different creatures, different types of animals have their own languages. How to do hex contents, because this can be run as a hex crawl, though of course the size of the hex is going to be very different than in a typical RPG because you are so much smaller. Big list of random landmarks that you can plop down into your hex crawls. Reminds me a little bit of Maze Rats in that sense, where there's just lots of these really useful random tables that just generate stuff so that you can make up adventures on the fly. Section on factions. I think this stuff is new, especially the Earldom of Eck. You actually have a setting here that you can begin playing right away. Toolbox for creating your adventure sites, randomly stocking rooms, room types, treasure, and a little adventure site, Stumpsville. A little mouse town built into the side of a stump with all of the major landmarks keyed for you. And some useful tables and adventure seeds with a great summary at the back. Really beautifully designed. I believe that the person who created Mausritter is an actual layout designer by trade because it's just really well done, very clean, very easy to read. Some of the bonus stuff that you actually get inside the box are, of course, the turn tracker, as I mentioned before. You get a Game Master screen. Let's see if I can open up the whole thing here. There we go. So there's one side over there, and then all the way to over there. It's a really nice big portrait. And then the actual information you get is we have the best practices, the summary of the rules here, saves, magic, combat, resting, how to do overland travel, hirelings, treasure, and lots of random tables for non-player mice, so you can easily generate NPCs whenever you need them. Next up is a rules reference guide, similar to what we saw inside the Game Master's screen, to be honest. You can just have that, possibly pass it out to new players who just need a quick overview of the rules. We have a little adventure in here, Honey in the Rafters, which is done in this short little fold out zine style. And we're going to see more of that when we get to the adventure collection. So how this works is that on one side we have the encounters, along with these stats for any monsters you might find there. And then these two pages are a map of the environment. In this case, it's a little log cabin. And it's all done in a 3D style because verticality is a big part of this. You are a mouse, you can climb stuff. So that's really great to see, is you can easily, just by looking at this picture, figure out how you're going to traverse things, what your obstacles are going to be, and things like that. Everything is just keyed for you right here, pointed straight to the map. Excellent. That's really easy to run. Section on curses, treasure, and spells that you can use, and some adventure hooks on the back. It's basically just a short little adventure location. You can just plop down this little cabin anywhere in a hex, and you have something interesting for the players to interact with, especially this beehive that's in the rafters. We have a whole bunch of these really high quality cardstock. They're pretty thick, so it has a nice thickness to it. And you can punch these out. They're already scored here, and you can have all sorts of little bits of equipment that you can put right onto your character sheet because you actually have slots that you fill in with these pieces of equipment. Different types of weapons here. I like how some are blank so that you can easily fill those in yourself. There's little tick marks on them. I believe that is for tracking how damaged they are, if I remember correctly. Torches, rations, and we have conditions here. These conditions can be used as ways your mouse is getting worn down over time. They can also fill up slots to show that as they're more exhausted or hungry or injured, they can't carry as much stuff. It's a very clever way of doing that. We have some extra stuff just for the adventure Honey in the Rafter. So it's yellow colored to match the color of the adventure. That's a nice little thing there. Dreamless, foggy eyes, bloated. These are special conditions that you can get. We have a pad of character sheets. Nice big thick pad. Very nicely done. Very simple, very straightforward, easy to read. I really like that. There's a good, I don't know how to guess, maybe about 50 or so of those in there. Really nice. And of course, a little expo marker that I think you can use to write on these pieces of inventory, because I think this is smooth enough that you could actually write on here and erase it. All right, so that's it for the Mausritter core rulebook box set. Really nicely designed, extremely sturdy, very premium looking. It feels great, it looks great. If you're really into Mausritter, I think it's a no-brainer because it has everything that you're gonna need. Next, let's take a look at the Estate, which is the Adventure Collection. This box set is absolutely packed with material, starting off with the campaign guidebook for the Estate. It has a hex crawl in the front here, although of course the hexes are a lot smaller than you would typically see in D&D, right? They're like, I don't know, 100 feet across or something like that. They're much, much smaller because the whole hex crawl is just on one estate. The neat thing is that every single one of these hexes is keyed right over here. A lot of these are just very simple one-sentence descriptions like driveway, right? 5 corresponds to over here. During morning and afternoon watches, huge growling steel beast prowl, deserted at night. That's all you really need to know. But some of these, especially the ones that are yellow, for example, 3 right there, that is the bedroom, and that is a separate adventure. What you're going to do is go into this box set, pull out the zine just for the adventure, and you can run it. So every one of these hexes, at least the yellow ones, have their own little pamphlet that describes what's there. It's a very nice system. There's also Brickport, which is a little bustling mouse settlement underneath the manor. So that's your kind of base of operations from which you can launch expeditions to different places in the estate. There's a list of other settlements nearby like Brambletown, the Chapel Priory, some factions. There is some faction play that is part of the rules for Mausritter, and connections between different adventure sites. To start the campaign, introduce Brickport to the mice and let them explore the town. Roll an event and see where it leads them. As the mice explore the estate, introduce the adventure sites. Mice can cross the hexes marked with an adventure site without having to explore it. Just describe the surrounds and they can dive in if they want. Let the players find their own adventure and aid them with the guidebook's rumors, the adventure site hooks, and connections between adventure sites. That's really great advice. If you have a good hex crawl, it should feel very player directed, and this is really helping you do that. We also have these Mausritter character record envelopes. At first I was wondering why you would need an envelope to put your character sheet inside of, and then I realized, of course, you have all of these little pieces of equipment on all of these cards, and they're going to slide around. So in between sessions, you can put everything inside this envelope, keep it all in one place. Very clever. There are, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these, which is good for a pretty standard sized party. There is a map here of the whole estate. If I was running this, I'd probably just give this to the players right away so they can see their surroundings. Then we have even more items. There's a lot of these because a lot of these correspond directly to one particular adventure, and they are color coded, which makes it even easier to figure out where they go to. So we have like the Tower of Soot, the Chapel of Eternal Peace, the Fruit of the Orchard, Song of the Frogicle, Giant Snakes in the Sewers, the Wizard of Arms and Armor, Workers Work, Rulers Rule, Science and Sorrow, Mush Rush, the Ticking Tower, and the Ember Tree. Each of them has their own specific set of items just for that adventure. It's very toyetic. I really like that about it. It would be kind of exciting for players to start a new adventure and have the Game Master pull out one of these new sheets of items and just have it face down so they can't see what it is. And then as they discover stuff in the actual mission, they can punch things out and hand them over. That's really cool. And now for the adventures themselves. If you like to collect RPG zines, this is like a gold mine because it's all just tons of little zines. Look at all that. They're all credited with their authors on the front, so that's Lazy Lich. I believe they are a blogger. I think I've seen them around somewhere before. There's another little marker here you can use to mark your items. And we have things like, all right, Tower of Soot. What is a Tower of Soot? Oh, it's a chimney, right? Because you turn it sideways like this, and now you can explore this adventure site vertically as you climb up the chimney. There's things like the Upper Mines, the Soot Kingdom's Outpost, the Swift Bug's Lair, Ash Pile and Soot Stairs. Everything that we would take for granted in our normal world is a adventure site in Mausritter. Timetable of events that you're going to have to go through. Inside Castle Soot, there's a little location inside the chimney. Who is a particular captive? So this one says, a most important mouse was captured by a young human and rumors have it stuck in a cage like a hamster. Like a hamster! Brave mice are needed to break the captive out, and they must act quickly, for the humans are packing up for the holiday, preparing to take the captive with them. The mice must venture into the big bedroom, then escape through the only exit, the chimney. Beware of the smoky fire that is about to go up in flames. Great. That's a perfect little module for maybe one session. The Ember Tree. During a particularly horrendous storm, an old oak tree was struck by lightning and burst into flames. Thanks to the pouring rain, the inferno quickly died down, but the fire continued to smolder deep within the tree. That's great. The potential there is fantastic. Several days after the storm, the blackened tree began to spew a thick, lung-burning smoke beneath the scorched bark, disturbing the surrounding settlements and wildlife. A hook might be, smoke from the tree is blocking out the sun. Local farmers offer a 500 pence reward for anyone who can stop it. The Ember Gem, something that you can find inside there. So we're climbing inside a tree that is burning from the inside out. Absolutely beautiful. The Ticking Tower is, of course, a giant grandfather clock, all keyed with its own locations. All the design of the keys is really great too. Uses bolding, uses bullet points, really easy to scan and figure out what's going on there. So this is great for running stuff on the fly, I think. Science and Sorrow by Nate Treem. I've reviewed Nate Treem stuff before. He does a lot of, this looks like Nate Treem's work. I bet he did this map. This feels like stuff I've seen from him before. We have Mush Rush. Where does this one take place? In an accident so humiliating that the details will remain unspoken, the royal crown tumbled from the castle window into a pool of sludge below. By the time the queen's embarrassment had faded enough to dispatch some guards, the tumblefolk had been and gone. These roaming beetles had collected the sludge, rolling it into giant balls for easy transport, unintentionally taking the queen's crown with it. That's great. The Wizard of Arms and Armor. You're investigating the inside of a giant suit of armor. How great is that? Workers work, rulers rule. Ooh, this looks like Skull Fungus. Yes, it is. I knew that art from somewhere. And it's all illustrated by Skull Fungus. I love all of these collaborations with different OSR artists and writers. Really fantastic. Odd things are happening inside the Moth Queen's mines. Shipments of ore have stopped arriving at nearby settlements and now there is talk of mice disappearing. Will the mice discover the darkness at the heart of the fungus-infested caves? Giant snake in the sewer. I love that this looks like the logo for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's a nice little callback. You got to have a good sewer adventure. That looks really great. Song of the Frogicle. Who is this by? Emma Acosta. There is a starting line. There's a little bit of a race here. In fact, there is a little supplement that goes along with this that you can use to actually run this particular race. I love little handouts. I love mini games in role-playing games, so it's fun to see that. Fruit of the Orchard by Madeline Ember. And The Chapel of Eternal Peace by Diogo Nogueira, who has previously won awards for his adventure writing. So I'm sure this is going to be as fun as his stuff normally is. We got a little chapel that we can investigate. I guess that would make sense if it's an older, like medieval estate. Have little chapels on the castle or the estate grounds. What is this one all about? Promises of clarity, wisdom, and eternal peace are attracting mice from all over to the ruins of the old chapel, occupied by a small sect of clerical mice with a mysterious philosophy. Led by Reverend Goldenfur, the sect travels the countryside in search of mice to convert, directing them to their sacred chapel. Those who join, they promise, shall finally see the truth, preparing them for eternal peace. Of course, those that go must part ways with all of their earthly belongings, donating it all to the Chapel of Eternal Peace, who will only use it to further the reach of their philosophy. The truth is, however, much darker. Goldenfur is the accomplice of the cat witch Sabrina, who gifted him with a magical amulet he uses to influence others, all in exchange for some mice to power the cat's rituals. Goldenfur is now a well-known, respected, and sometimes feared figure in the nearby mouse settlements, but few know of his shady alliance. That's really great. You know what that reminds me of? Fickle Goes West. That's what it reminds me of, which would also be a great structure for a Mausritter adventure. So there we have it. That is the Estate, a Mausritter adventure collection. Tons of little adventures that you can plop down, either in this hex scroll, or of course you can spread them out in your own Mausritter campaign anywhere that you want. It would work perfectly fine. Both of these are great examples of how to do a boxed set correctly. All of the contents are fun, they're colorful, they're easy to comprehend, and they are useful. There's not a lot of fluff in there. You're going to be using all of the stuff that's in these boxes if you'll be playing a Mausritter campaign. It's all really well constructed, really well laid out. It's not going to fall apart. You'll be using this stuff for years to come. If you want to check this out for yourself, as usual, I will put links in the description below where you can pick up the box set for the Mausritter and for the estate. And I'll throw in a link for where you can get the original Mausritter pamphlet, which I believe is still free online. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.